Welcome to the AAC Talk session titled AAC Apps, Considerations for Selecting, Customizing, and Getting Started, Part 1. We're pleased and honored to have Lauren Enders join us today. Lauren, I'll turn over the session. I'll turn it over to you to tell us a little bit about yourself and get us started.
All right. Can you hear me? I just unmuted myself. Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thanks for the brief introduction there, Tammy. So what we're going to be talking today about are AAC apps. We're going to be talking about considerations for selecting, customizing, and getting started. It can be quite confusing with, now that we have more apps out there, what do we choose? How do we set it up? And this is part 1 in 2 sessions that I'll do today. So hopefully you can attend both. My name is Lauren Enders. Let's see. Why is it not letting me turn on? Okay, there we go. All right, so I am a speech language pathologist. I work full-time as an augmentative communication and assistive technology consultant at the Bucks County Intermediate Unit. Perhaps my kind of claim to fame outside the IU is that I am a profuse user of social media for learning and networking and sharing AAC and general AT related information. So I kind of do my work during the day and then go home, and I'm always on different AAC sites, and I find that that's been a tremendous help in terms of meeting people in the field and learning new information, and also being able to share resources that I have. So, all right, so what I hope for all of you to get from today's session, at least from part 1, is that you be able to, once we go through the set of apps, that you be able to identify at least one unique feature of each of the robust AAC apps we talk about, that you be able to describe a helpful rule of thumb when you're selecting button size. So once you do select that app, well, how many buttons should we be giving this individual? And then defining what characterizes an AAC app as a robust AAC option. Okay, so on Patent's website, there is a handout. The handout is more of an outline form because it is an accessible style handout, and to do slides or tables or anything like that is not accessible with screen readers. If you should want to have a handout of the actual slides from today, you can do that. What you'll see there is a QR code and a link. I can put that up again at the end if needed. With the QR code, most of your smartphones, you should be able to just take the camera and aim it right at that QR code, and it should launch the website where I have the slides held. There's also that link which you can use as well. I'm not sure how long we need to put that up there until everybody gets it. I guess, let's see, look in the chat and make sure. All right, and there's the link in the chat. Wonderful. All right, then I'm going to move on. Okay, so some assumptions for today. Primarily, we are going to be looking at apps that I consider to be robust symbol-based AAC apps. There are text-based apps. There are apps that I would not say are robust. Primarily, what we'll be looking at are those robust apps. We should also assume that selecting and providing an appropriate AAC system is really truly only the first step. I see so many teams and families who are very, very intent on spending lots of time to make sure they get the right tool, and then unfortunately, it's not the easiest to implement AAC. It's something new and different. So it's really important that we then shift our focus to doing best practices in AAC implementation. And that's something that's another topic altogether, but it's just something important to mention. And that aided language stimulation, so modeling AAC, is truly an absolutely essential component to any AAC implementation protocol, regardless of what system you put in place. And really all that's about is that if we're expecting the output of an individual, either fully or in part, to be using AAC, they need to be hearing other people speak AAC to them and seeing them. pointing to symbols while they speak. And that's not something I can go into much today, but I do have resources on that. I am going to put my email up at the end. If there's anything that I touch on that you want more information, or if you have questions, I fear that we're not going to have a ton of time for questions at the end, because I've got this really jam-packed in both part 1 and part 2 so that I can give as much information as possible. But please feel free to use that email address you will get at the end to ask anything. And then you can also put things in the chat, and perhaps that can be saved if for some reason we don't get to all those questions. All right, so when we look at high-tech AAC options, I think most of you probably know there are also no-tech and low-tech options out there, but our focus today is going to be looking at these high-tech voice output AAC options. We really have 2 choices there. We have dedicated AAC system where the hardware, so the actual machine, and the software are designed specifically for augmentative communication. And those are things like Tobii Dynavox products and Saltillo products like the NovaChat and the Accent from PRC. On the other side, which have become quite popular in recent years since the advent of the iPad, are AAC apps that can be loaded onto consumer devices. And largely most of the things we're going to be talking about, the apps, are going to be things that run on an iPad, but I will also mention apps that we'll look at that can also run on other platforms. Our focus today is on those AAC apps that run on consumer devices, on tablets. So some important considerations as we move forward. It's important to consider essential system features for each person. And I think many of you have heard that by now, that we should be doing feature matching. We should be making sure that we identify all the features that someone needs. And we do that largely with the SET process, in Pennsylvania and many other places. But it is important to note that tablet-based AAC options are not appropriate for everyone. So not everybody that can use a high-tech device can use a tablet-based option, and there are some reasons for that. When multiple app options might work, there is one push that's actually starting to come out, and there was a wonderful presentation at ATIA by Christopher Bouguet. And what he was focusing on is we do spend lots of time talking about essential system features and making sure it's this individual choice. But many times, when we get to the end of our kind of list of features that will work for someone, we really find that there may be multiple options. And it's at that point that we may really want to be considering some other things. Because we know that we must be modeling, we must be supporting and doing lots of teaching, to consider the school team's experience and their preferences. If multiple apps will be an option, then considering their experience, their preferences may be, beneficial, in that if they are willing to model it or use it more, then we're going to have better success on the part of the user. Also look at, what else is being used in the class. If we have multiple options that are going to work for an individual, if we've got 3 other kids using an app, while we don't want to choose it because the other students are using it, if it's going to be easier for the teacher to actually model it, and if those features match their needs, that's something that should really be considered. And also family input. If the family, looks at the app and says, I hate this, there's no way I'm going to use it, it's unlikely that we're going to see a lot of success at home. So we really need to start kind of balancing, yes, we need those features to be a match, but when looking and there are multiple options within that feature set, we need to be considering these things. So there are times when I often go straight to dedicated systems. So things like our Tobii Dynavoxes and our NovaChats. Let me just make sure I see a chat, make sure there's nothing that's going on. Oh, okay. So, whoop, sorry about that, folks. Okay, so when people have complex bodies and they need alternate access to communication and also to access their environment, I often will go to a dedicated system. While we are seeing a little bit of an upswing in the ability to control our environment with tablets now that we have smart speakers because they understand synthesized speech from devices, and we have things like Hue light bulbs, we're really not at the same level. We can't make our tablets so easily into a remote control for our TV. Well, sometimes we can depending on our cable system, but I like to use dedicated systems when we have folks with complex bodies that we can just plug a switch in if they need scanning. We don't need an interface. So that's one reason we would choose a dedicated, or at least explore that first. If they need features that are not found in that tablet-based system, if their experience, I've had numerous kids, often some of our friends on the autistic spectrum, whose experience with consumer tablets, let's say for an iPad, causes them to view a tablet as, this is for me to play. This is my YouTube device. And if that is hard to break, and I can tell you that in some cases it is, that may be a reason for looking at a dedicated device. I just had a follow-up set meeting, or a reset meeting for a young man in middle school, where we explored a NovaChat, not because he couldn't use an iPad, but because an iPad was such a motivator in terms of YouTube videos, that we were afraid that we would not get the same kind of exploration and use, because he was just really wanting to use YouTube. So we did a NovaChat trial, and he did spectacularly. Also, we want to consider perhaps dedicated devices when we have individuals who will soon age out of the school system. And if there's not going to be a whole lot of support out there, if maybe they're not going to have speech, they're not going to have a therapist that can help them, when you have a dedicated device, you have the support of the company. And that can be really, really beneficial, especially when we have families who are trying to manage this on their own once they're out of their kind of cocoon of school-age services. All right, so when we look at tablet-based AAC apps, there are some pros and cons, as there are with anything else. They're, on the pro side, they're widely available, they're less expensive than dedicated devices, they're lightweight, they can be quick to purchase and deploy. A lot of times districts prefer them because they're easier to manage and they're cheaper. The cons of tablet-based apps, well, they don't have built-in switched ports, which means you need to use an interface if you are going to use scanning. There are not built-in environmental controls. We're not there yet in terms of the same level of support as some of the dedicated devices. The volume is lower. When you have a device that was meant as an AAC system, they put much better speakers in there. Now, if you get an iPad Pro, they are much louder than the standard iPads, though. So that is something to consider if you really need that volume. Most of the apps that are out there don't have phone support for technical support, like a company that makes dedicated devices. And if they do, sometimes it's an extra service that you're paying for to be able to have phone support. And that part where I talked about, they can be viewed as leisure devices because they're used to using a tablet for leisure. All right, so who might do well with a tablet-based AAC system? So individuals with autism, with intellectual impairment, with speech and language impairments, with medical status that can interfere with natural speech. For example, if I have a young lady who has a trach, and that affects her ability to speak, but she can use dynamic display. She's good with direct selection. Also acquired language disorders. Individuals who are ambulatory and can access a system via direct selection. That's often, some of my go-tos when I'm thinking a tablet-based system. When I have an individual that's not ambulatory or that needs some of these other features, sometimes I'm looking at a dedicated system. All right, some thoughts about assessment. I'm going to really kind of go through this very quickly, as this is really kind of not our focus. It's that whole bit about feature matching. We got to make sure that we know what they need in terms of features, and then we explore. It is important to know about all of your loan options, because we know that we should always try AT before we buy it. So, local and statewide lending libraries. We're super, super lucky in Pennsylvania to have the short-term loan program through Patent, and I think many of us use that a ton. We can also sometimes get loans through vendors. There are free trials through some apps, and I will let you know when there is an app that has a free trial as we discuss it. And in some cases, you can get app codes from developers. It's not super common, but some of the apps will offer that, where they will give you an app code if you're an SLP or if you're an AT person who's going to be demonstrating this. So that is sometimes an option. All right, there are some nice resources out there. This one, now, of course, with any assistive technology resource, as soon as it's put out, it's kind of out of date because things change. But if you're looking for a document that you could either use or maybe create your own or modify, and looking at how to identify features, this isn't a bad one to start with. And this is from this is a comparison chart from Oklahoma Assistive Technology Center, and we have a link there. If you're also looking for information on AAC app features, Jane Farrell keeps an AAC app list on her website, Jane Farrell Consulting. And she does go through some of the features. It's not, you know, super in detail. She does also have a rating system, which is you know, 1, 2, or 3 stars. So again, not super detailed, but she does try to upload new versions, usually at least once a year, if not maybe twice a year, to this list. And perhaps we'll be seeing a new one soon from her, and that can be a nice resource. Okay, so what actually makes an AAC app robust? When we're saying a robust core-based app, what do we mean? First of all, there should be considered, this is Kate Ahern, and this is from her blog post, What is Robust Vocabulary? It was an obvious one to use. She talks about the fact that there should be consistency of motor planning, and anybody who really gets into AAC learns that just like when we're typing on our keyboard and we want our keys to stay in the same place, we need that same type of motor automaticity to develop in our AAC use, whether we are direct selecting or using you know, another form of access. So we need to have something that is going to be able to either it, you know, as it comes quote out of the box, or if we are moving things around, that we are able to provide a consistent motor plan. Expandable vocabulary. We know that vocabulary needs grow, and that has to be something that we can expand if needed. Grammar. We need grammar supports. Even if we are starting with someone and right now they're not conjugating verbs, right now they're not using different pronouns, they may be, and the other piece to that is if those things are not there, we can't model them. And if we don't model them, we can't teach them, and we certainly can't expect them to learn it. So even if they're not using it yet, we need to have it there to model and to also be available for later when they might learn it. We need the alphabet. No system, even the most robust core-based system that has been customized with fringe vocabulary, those personal words, no system is ever going to be able to have every word that a person might need. For that reason, it's always going to be a goal that we also be able to spell. If we're going to be spelling, we need something with a keyboard and the alphabet. There's another piece, you know, with the big push with core vocabulary, there's another piece that sometimes gets missed. We do need core words because we need to be able to create generative language, be able to say what we want by putting words together. Generative language is not always the quickest. And there are situations, for example, I have to go to the bathroom. You know, by the time you maybe generate that message, we might have a problem with some individuals. So there are things that we want to be nice and quick, some social things, some things that we say all the time. So we absolutely want a system that can also accommodate pre-programmed whole messages, whether they be phrases or sentences, or even perhaps something longer. Imagine if you have a speech that you need to deliver, or you have you know, some lines in a play. And of course, core words. So moving on. So some other features we might look for in a robust AAC app. Well, we're hopeful that there be something that allows us to collect data and then also analyze that data. What are the words this individual is using? Where, you know, looking at the data, what are they using most often? Are they all nouns? Well, if it's all nouns, maybe we should be moving to making sure we're really modeling those verbs and those describing words. Backup is absolutely essential. We want that to be easy and reliable. And especially in the environment, you know, for example, if you were not going to always have access to an internet connection, then you'd need to figure out a way to back that up that was going to work for you in all situations. Alphabet access was mentioned again, and exploration. So that's a feature that we're really seeing. Search is pretty much in every app now. It started out in a few, and now, you know, because if we have to model, we need to know where these words are. So most of these systems, we really want something that can show us where words are. Babel is a feature that's in one particular app, which is Speak for Yourself. And what that does is even if you hide some buttons, you have the ability to toggle this Babel feature on, which shows you all of the words. And then when you're ready to go back to the hidden version, you just push that again and it goes away. So that's one other feature of exploration. And this was from Dr. Zangari of Practical AAC. So I just mentioned this a couple slides ago that, we need to make sure that we have a robust option. Even if we have someone who's super, super emergent, we can't teach them the language if it's not there to teach. So we must have robust systems. So the rule of thumb, and this is often something that I really see a lot of people being confused and kind of misguided about. Many people feel that when someone is starting out, well, we should start with just a few big buttons because it's very overwhelming and very confusing. But what happens is every time you change that button array, you have to restart and relearn a new motor plan. So what the rule of thumb is actually to select the button size and array with the smallest buttons. So that's the most buttons per screen that person can see and access independently. That doesn't mean that you can't hide some in the beginning, but overall we want them to be the smallest size possible where they can use it. And the reason is because of a motor plan. That we do not want to have them develop an entirely new motor plan every time we add more buttons to their system or page. Robust AAC apps. It's important to know that most developers do continually update their apps and they add features. They are often responsive to our requests for modifications and new features. That's a lot of the time how we get those new features. So I encourage all of you that are using these apps with your students, with your children, that if there is something that your app is not doing that you really wish it did, reach out to the developer and just have a conversation about it. See if it's something on the horizon, if it's something they're considering, or if they can explain to you why it wouldn't be something that they would use. And that each robust app, as we go through these, you'll see that they have at least one unique feature, and that can really kind of help sometimes in deciding which app to use. All right, so types of robust apps. We got two kinds. We've got folder-based and we've got motor plan-based. These are the apps we're going to look at. I don't even need to list them all right now. I want to make sure that we kind of get through everything. What I've done is I have some videos of each. I didn't want to try to do this live with the video with demonstration because we all know that on a webinar platform that trying to juggle technology sometimes can end in disaster. So I did as much as possible with pre-recorded videos. So we've got folder-based and we've got motor plan-based apps that we're going to look at. So what is a folder-based app? Well, the vocabulary is organized categorically. Many people find them to be more intuitive, especially when they know their categories. You know that an apple is a food, or that a plane is a vehicle, so you know how to get into those categories. Another thing about folder-based apps, they can require numerous navigations to get to the desired word because you have to drill down into so many categories. So that's something important to know as well. And that sometimes we find that in folder-based apps that words are repeated multiple times within the system, and it can be very hard to keep them in the same spots, which again can be a motor plan challenge. So that's something to just look out for and be cognizant when you're setting systems up. So folder-based AAC app examples. So here is a little video on what they might look like.
Okay, we're going to take a quick look at what a folder-based AAC app looks like and how it functions. I'm going to just take the first example here, which is Proloquo to Go. Let's go back to a home screen. So on this page, let's say that I wanted to say the word delicious. What I need to do, delicious is an adjective, so let's look for the describing words, which are in the bottom row. I'm going to go into describe, and then I have some more categories. So delicious is probably the way that something tastes, so I would go into tastes, and there's delicious.
Delicious.
So folder-based apps kind of rely on your knowledge of categories, and many people do find them more intuitive when they already do have that knowledge of categories. Another example of a folder-based app would be TouchChat. So again, if I want to go into describing to look for delicious, I have my first page of describing words here. I don't see delicious, so perhaps that's on another page. I don't even know where it is on here. But we can also go back, and there's a Describe A to Z button. So in the category of describing words that start with D, I can choose D,
And there is
Delicious.
So again, what you see is that to make sure that we have a place to put all of this vocabulary when we only have so many buttons per screen, we need to file them away in folders, and then we rely on our knowledge of categories and how we learn that to navigate through the app. And that's an example of what folder-based apps look like.
Delicious.
Okay, so I see, can I share the bit.ly for my handout when I show another video? Do you want me to do the bit.ly right now? Let's see. Let's go out. I'm seeing in my chat that there is I'm looking at my, okay, right now. All right, so let's get out and go back up. Okay, so there you go. All right. Now it's in the chat window, so let me go back to where I was. Let's find. Okay, so we're on the next one. So then the next,
Okay, we're going to take,
whoops. So then the next one, the other type is a motor plan based AAC app. So the vocabulary is organized differently. In this case, it's organized with the intent to maintain a consistent motor plan rather than always being categorically where it doesn't always make initial sense on how something ended up in a particular page, but because it is really, really set up to have a very consistent motor plan. Some people find them to be less intuitive than folder-based apps because of that, because they're looking for those categories and it doesn't really make sense to them where things are. However, it's really important to know that once you learn that motor plan, think about the keyboard, your QWERTY style keyboard. Does it make sense that it's in QWERTY as opposed to ABC? Well, probably not. But you got used to it and you developed a motor plan and you're super, super quick at it probably. So it is important to note that motor plan based can require fewer navigations, some significantly fewer, only maybe 2 navigations or the maximum of maybe 3, whereas some folder based, you could really get up to 5, 6, 7, 8 drilling down. So it is important to know that navigation might be easier in a motor plan based once it's learned. So motor plan based examples would be like this.
Okay, now we're going to take a quick look at what a motor plan based app looks like. We're going to start with LAMP, Words for Life. Language acquisition through motor planning is actually what that acronym means, LAMP. So this app was designed to have a consistent motor plan that people learn, and the intention is to use that motor plan to make communication more effective and more efficient, and to develop language that way. So I think one of the easiest ways to show you is perhaps with some conjugation of verbs. So you'll see in that third row we have the different conjugations of verbs, the different verb tenses. So let's say that I wanted to say some verbs with the ing form. So if I hit play and then go to the row above, I can say playing. If I say do, that word doing, that's going to be in exactly the same spot. Third row, 5th button over is always going to be that ing. So just like with a computer keyboard, you've learned where the A key is, you've learned where the space bar is, and you may not need to look. We can develop the same kind of motor plans when we have those kinds of consistencies in programming within an app. So that is a really quick example of LAMP Words for Life. Now I'm going to show you one more. Whoop, that one's not it. Speak for Yourself is another motor plan based app, and in Speak for Yourself I think one of the easiest ways to show you the motor plan component here, first of all, that there is no word that requires more than 2 navigations, and an example of that motor planning is that, let's say that I wanted to say the word read. If I hit read right in the center, what I get is navigation to a page that has a whole bunch of stuff, including the word read. If I actually wanted to say the word read is directly beneath where it was on the front screen. So let me show you again. Read's right in the middle.
There it is in the same spot. So I'm actually, you can't see it, but my finger's hovering right over. So what can happen is we develop a better plan where we can just do a quick double tap and we don't even need to look at it once it goes to that secondary screen. All right. So all of the robust AAC apps that we're going to explore have the following features, and I'm going to do these really quickly. They run on an iPad. They're dynamic display. They have voice output. They're robust in terms of core vocabulary. They can be customized. They have color coding options. They offer electronic backup and restore. They have keyboard access within the app, so you have the ability to spell if you want to. Most of them have the ability to also turn off the keyboard if for some reason you have to do that. Programming and tool locks. Importing of your own images in addition to the symbols that they come with. They have the ability to share the message window. You can share the message window to social media. You can share it to email. You can share it to messages. And the ability to hide and show buttons. One of the things that we need many times is to decrease the complexity. So sometimes we hide buttons and then as they need them, we unhide them. All right, so during our time together today, we will review a set of robust core-based, symbol-based AAC apps. That was a lot of based words. We will discuss which apps might work well with individuals needing specific features very quickly. This is a lot of content to do in an hour and even in 2 hours because we have two parts to this. We will not have time to review all features of any app that we cover, and we will not have time to really talk about, or I won't really have time to answer questions about recommendations for specific students. So those are things that you could definitely save for an email if you have specific questions. So ProLoquo to Go is from Assistiveware. That's what it looks like. Its features. Now what I have here are some tables. If there's something that's unique to the app, I have it in red. One of the things that's really nice about ProLoquo is you can select more than one button at a time and modify them. For example, colors or naming them as a certain part of speech. Another unique thing about ProLoquo to Go is that it has a companion on the Apple Watch, which allows you to use the watch as a switch to store phrases, sentence starters, and categories that can be activated from your watch, which is pretty cool. It has the core-based Crescendo, which is their kind of research-based, core-based user. It also offers Gateway, which is a core-based program that's been out for many years. We used to see them, on Dynavoxes, on 3100s, and on VMAXs. It's by Joan Bruno, and you can still get Gateway on a number of apps, and ProLoquo was one of them. It's an in-app purchase for an additional, I believe, $150 on top of the ProLoquo to Go. You have flexibility, lots of flexibility, not just in adding space and separation between buttons, but in all kinds of things about the physical aspect of the way things look in ProLoquo to Go. It has automatic backups to the device itself, or Google Drive or iCloud, and you have lots of other backup options like backing up to iTunes or Dropbox or Google Drive or a Wi-Fi transfer or iCloud, and even AirDrop. I don't think I have AirDrop on there. You have several color coding system options. You can change the intensity of the background, of the actual buttons, and also of the overall background. There's a search feature that kind of brings you to the words you're looking for. There's a progressive language feature where it can, initially maybe it shows you 5 of the words on a page, and then it will gradually show you more in a developmental framework. So, it will show you the earliest developing words first, and then gradually you bring in more as as the individual is developing through phases of language development. You can now add recorded speech or sounds. That was not the case before, and it is only the case on newer iPads. So if you have an iPad 2 or a 3 or 4, you can't do that. It has comprehensive scanning controls built into the app. That's important to know because if you try to use iPad scanning controls in an app that doesn't have its own, it really can be an exercise in frustration. So if you are looking to scan on an iPad and you're not, there's a reason why you're not looking at a dedicated device, consider an app like ProLoquo to Go that has those built-in features within the app. The price includes high quality voices, including the voices for bilingual users in a number of languages. Something cool people don't know about are expressions, where it will say certain common phrases with inflection. What I found recently was a young lady with autism, is that she was more likely to use the words on her social page when they had intonation. So if the word was hello, if it said hello, she was much more likely to use it than if she just said hello. Comprehensive accessibility options are available in ProLoqua to Go, even for changing the way that it responds to your touch on the iPad. There's also bilingual options where you can switch back and forth between English and Spanish, English and French, I think Dutch, and maybe something else. I'm not really sure, but it offers grammar support in both languages. So what kinds of vocabulary? We have crescendo, and we have gateway, and we talked a little bit about those. So they're both core-based. Crescendo comes with the app, and gateway is an additional download. The only time that I have used gateway, and not that it's not a good app, was that I had a young man that had lots of experience on gateway in the past. So, when moving forward with the new system, it made sense to keep his original vocabulary system so he didn't have to relearn. So I might have to cut some of these videos short, but I just want you to see a little bit of each app. We've got a lot to cover in the next 25 minutes or 20, maybe a little bit less than that. So here's ProLoqua.
Okay, I want to do a really quick run through of some of the unique and really helpful features of ProLoqua to Go. This is certainly not a time when we can show all of them, but let's get started. So one of the things I like is that the interface is very, very powerful and easy to use, and you can change more than one button at a time. So let's say that I wanted to make these last three buttons blue. I can select all of them, and I can change their color at once, which is a really powerful feature. So let's change them back since I'm just showing you that. All right, so another thing that I want to show you is that we can change, if we go into our settings and we go into appearance, there are some things that we can change globally. So one nice thing I like to do for many individuals is I like to, under the view, go into advanced options and tell it to make the background black. I find that a lot of times the adults, and also sometimes the kids or the adults who are using the device, might be able to see it with this better contrast. Another feature is that many of us use color coding to indicate parts of speech. And in ProLoqua to Go, you actually have a number of choices. So you have Fitzgerald key, which is what I tend to use, and many of the apps do use. They use a modified version, so I usually switch it to Fitzgerald key, which then makes the actions green and the people yellow. So there's a specific code. But to default, at a default, it just does the outside. So we can even go in and we can tell it that we want the whole button to be a color. So we're able to go in and we can say for the buttons, for the background color, we can tell it not just fringe, that we want all of the buttons to have a background color. And then we can go back and we can even tell it, what do they want to look like? Light, pale, bright, woo! So I'm going to go with, let's see, with light.
Okay.
Okay.
So that just gives you a really
quick run through of some of the
unique. That gives you a really quick run through of a few of the features. So, okay, who might do well with ProLoqua to Go? What are those features? They might work well with who? Well, someone who needs space between buttons or a customizable color coding scheme, someone who needs a specific number of rows, columns, or buttons because you have so much flexibility. Someone needs bilingual vocabulary, someone who wants to use an iPad but is a Switch user. Someone who wants to use the app in portrait, up and down orientation. Not every app allows you to hold the device, whether it's an iPad or an iPhone, in that up and down mode. And every once in a while, we have somebody that really prefers that up and down orientation, that wants to do direct selection, but it needs some supports. And wants to scroll within pages. So you can actually have more buttons than show on the screen and then scroll rather than having to hit an arrow button that takes you between pages. So did you know that, there's some, did you know, I think what I'm going to do is these did you knows, they are in the handout. I want to make sure that you actually see all of the apps. So, make sure that you know that most of the apps that I go over, there's a few did you knows, just things that I kind of, in my travels throughout the county, I find that people don't know about these things. So they are there for you in the handout. So TouchChat. We're going to be talking about TouchChat HD AAC with word power. Really, really important that we talk about that word power because that's the robust option. It has predictive selection within the app, which makes you, it kind of forces you through to help you create an utterance. New in TouchChat, which is super exciting with the newer devices. So the brand new iPad Pros and the iPhones in the X series has head pointing. So you can actually, just like you would use head pointing with one of the reflective dots, you can do that, but with no dot. The front-facing camera actually sees your head. You can also now change the amount of space between buttons. On TouchChat, you have a nice selection of page sets, 20, 25, 42, and all the way up to 140. You can import social pages from Dr. Senner and Matt Baud from TALCAAC.com. And again, you have these slides, so you will have all of these links and all of this information. You can now play audio files. Well, you actually have been able to. You can play audio files from the media library or even videos or YouTube link in TouchChat. Not that we always want to do that, but it is something to know about. You can also have Gateway. There is a $10 light version that sometimes I recommend to teams. It doesn't speak and you can't save backups. However, it is something that you can use as a modeling device if you have a student or an individual who doesn't want you to touch their device when they're modeling. And we know how important modeling is. So that's a nice option. You can have visual scenes where you have buttons around the photo. You can control smart speakers with some downloadable, with some controls that are already built in. And there's a lot of backup options. They have increased a tremendous amount in the last year, including AirDrop, and you can actually email backups as well, in addition to all the original ones. Now, I just talked about the highlights, so I just want you to see the predictive selection feature.
Now we're going to take a quick run through of TouchChat HD AAC with word power. There are two versions. One is $149.99 and one is $299.99. It is really important if you're looking for a robust AAC option where you have a lot of options in terms of the number of buttons per screen that you do make sure you get the word power version. So in word power, one of the key features that many people like is number one, that it's folder based and it's intuitive. If I want an apple, I can be pretty sure that I either go into eat or I go into groups and food, and then either apple, if it's one of my favorites, might be on the front screen, or I have to go into fruit and vegetables.
Apple.
So you did see that there's a number of navigations, and that's perhaps one of the drawbacks of it is one of the drawbacks of a folder based app. So it's more intuitive, but it's a lot of hits. But one of the things we kind of often talk about in the AAC world with what people like about word power is...
What just happened?
Now we're going to take a quick...
Oh, I'm not sure exactly what happened there. It stopped. But what I was trying... Let's see if I can get it.
Get the word power version. So in word power, one of the key features that many people like is number one, that I either go then either
not sure what happened
navigation or if navigation is more intuitive, but it's a lot of hits. But one of the things we kind of often talk about in the AAC world with what people like about word power is...
All right, something happened with this video, so I'm going to just move along because we don't have that much time, but what I was going to be talking about was predictive selection. So if I hit I, then it automatically goes to a screen of verbs, because typically in language, if you say I, the next thing you're going to use is a verb. And many people really like that because they feel that it's really teaching a child, or any individual, that they need to be increasing their utterance. They need to be adding a verb next, and it shows you that. This head pointing, this is something that Again, I think that it's probably not best for us to focus on. I was really trying to squash a lot of information in here. So head pointing is what I just mentioned, where you use your head to control a cursor on the screen, and then when you get to the cell that you want, then you can do a multitude of things like open your mouth, you can blink your eyes, you can stick your tongue out. So it's very, very cool and exciting. And I can provide in the chat when we're done, I can provide a link to this video, or you can email me. Okay, so who might TouchChat be good for? Well, if you have a new iPad Pro or an iPhone 10 and you want to access this with head pointing, TouchChat would be awesome if they're the first to do this. If you have prior experience with folder-based AAC and you know your categories, if you'll benefit from that predictive selection, if you're supported by teams who feel most comfortable modeling folder-based apps, if you need access to some photos and visual scenes as well as the traditional grid-based layouts, and also if you want to use an iPhone or an iPod Touch, both ProLoco and TouchChat will work on an iPhone or an iPod Touch. So we're going to skip the did you knows. Grid for iPad may be one that you're not familiar with. Grid for iPad is from Smartbox, which is a UK company. And Grid for iPad has a really nice, clean interface. It is folder-based. It has 30 and 54 button users. It has some neat things like a phonics keyboard. So if you are, if you're teaching reading as well, and hopefully you are, because we know that we should be teaching literacy with everyone, there are some included keyboard options that allows you to, you touch the key and it says the sound of the letter instead of the letter name. You can do remote editing from a Windows computer. You can change verb conjugations with a magic wand tool. And a really nice thing about this is that you can have a 30-day free trial of this app. It's available in a lot of language, more than many of other ones, 16 languages. It can also, if you have someone who's using Grid 3 software on, let's say, a Tobii Dynavox, you can use this as a backup on an iPad in case something happens. Let's see. It might work well for somebody who needs quick access to conjugating verbs within a folder-based system, that maybe they need a mix of core-based and activity pages, that they need PCS. So if they need those board maker symbols, because that's what they've already had, you can get them as an option in here. Accessibility options, the need to incorporate messages that you have banked. So if you have banked your voice because you're losing your voice, you can actually include those in the Grid for iPad. That if you need that phonics keyboard, and if having access to an iPad but you have no app, then because of that free trial, this can really be beneficial. All right, so let's see if I can get to the part with the
you have, and those quick hits can be really helpful, especially
I want to show you at the end.
Black thing, except it's for individuals who need larger buttons.
All right, so here's the 30.
Super Core is a really nice option. Smartbox, the company that makes the Grid, is a company from the UK who's been doing AAC quite some time, but they've just more recently been represented in the United States. And this is, I think, a really nice option to add to kind of our AAC bag of tricks or apps in our world.
So if you take a look at this screen, what you see, and let's put it back here. Okay, so what you see on the right is you see some topic-based buttons, and then on the left you have people and action, just like your other core-based. Those who, what, why, where, and when buttons at the top, they actually change with word prediction. If you chose I, you get some choices in those buttons. So you have a combination of core, you have core word prediction within this screen, but then you also have topic-based. You see there's things like play and news and places. So it is a nice mix that's a little different than some of the other apps we see out there. Okay. Another one we have is Clicker Communicator. And there's, this is not quite as robust as some of them out there. But there is a feature that is really, really important to know about, and there's really one key feature, and it's this one. It's this super keys feature where you see super keys access method. It is Switch accessible. It does have a clean interface. It is now available for Chrome. So if you have a student who's got a Chromebook tablet with a touch screen, then it is an option now. That was just released a couple of months ago. But Super Keys is one of the biggest things that, one of the biggest reasons I would consider Clicker Communicator. And if you can look at this picture here, that Clicker Communicator, it will separate into quadrants and then you can blow them up. So let's take a look.
Okay, this is Clicker Communicator from Cricksoft, and one of the key features of this app that really sets it apart from other apps is something called Super Keys, which you can also get as a Super Keys add-on keyboard for system keyboards on iPads. What happens here is it breaks the display up into quadrants, and sometimes we have those direct selectors who are maybe not super accurate, but they still want to direct select, and for whatever reasons don't want to use a key guard or cannot use a key guard. So if you hit any one of these quadrants, it then blows up, makes the target larger, and makes it easier to hit. And then
all right, so that's pretty cool. And that you can possibly think of some kids that might need that, or some, anybody using AAC. So it might work well though for those who really want to be a direct selector, who are not a key guard user, but they need some kind of assistance in making those targets larger. If you need switch access, it is built into the app, like ProLoco2Go. It's from Cricksoft, which is, of course, they make clicker products, so that, it's a well-established AT company. If you're looking for something that runs on a Chromebook, only that and Cough Drop will work. If you need PCS, those board maker symbols, you could also use Clicker Communicator. If you want word prediction with text-to-speech in addition to the core word grids, there's some flexibility there in terms of the number of words predicted if you had like a really good speller. All right, Avaz. So this one is another one that maybe not as many of you are familiar with, and there's a few really unique features. If you look at this screen, on the right-hand side, you have a menu bar where you have a button that just says, I made a mistake. There's a button that makes an alert signal. It kind of sounds like an elevator arriving, but sometimes we do have kids that, or people, device users who really need to gain attention. That's kind of a neat, unique feature there. Let's see what else. There is a zoom feature, which is often the one that gets me using Avaz. With kids with hearing impairment and also attentional issues, this zoom feature actually zooms the button forward and then brings it back, gaining your attention when you activate it. There's another cool feature where, let's say that you needed to add 10 foods on a page. You can actually list them: apple, pear, banana, and then it will just pop the buttons and populate it with images. So there's some very, very unique features, and I think this one is definitely one to explore a little bit and get a sense of what it will do. It is really only robust and perfectly set up. I don't want to say nothing is perfectly set up, but it is organized in a core layout up to 40 buttons. You can do up to 77, but they have not yet created a well laid out. You kind of have to do it yourself if you're doing more than 40. So I just want to show you the zoom.
Okay, this is Avaz Pro. There are a number of unique features to this app. One of them is that we have this little bar along the side where we can say,
I made a mistake.
Or we can do a little alert sound. Some folks like that. Another thing that is a key, and one of the main reasons I tend to use this app with certain individuals, is that it has a zoom feature, which can be really helpful when we have individuals with hearing impairment or even challenges with maintaining attention on the screen. And it's simply that once you select a button, it zooms forward and goes back to place. You have some control over how quickly that happens. That's the main feature I want to show in Avaz. Avaz, I'm not even sure exactly how to say that. We also have a unique feature where there are symbols in the word prediction. And even the letters zoom forward. So that's another unique feature.
All right. Okay, so Avaz, again, so what you know, the theme that you should be seeing is that each of these apps that I've shown so far, even though I am kind of blowing through them, unfortunately, we have such a limited amount of time. I know I'm going quickly, and I'm sorry if it's too quickly, but I'm really hoping to just at least have you have exposure to each of these robust folder-based apps. So sorry about the rate. So it might work well. We kind of talked about that. If you need a lot of customized fringe, so those custom words, it can be helpful because you can just kind of enter them in a list and they just populate. Another interesting thing to know about is initially Avaz had both an iPad and an Android version. The Android version then went away because they were finding that not enough people were using it. But then by popular demand, they actually brought it back. So if you do have someone where, you know, there's one district in Bucks County that really uses just Androids. So if we need to do that, if we need to look at something that is robust, we now do have Avaz as an option again. Okay, we've got 2 minutes. So Snap Plus Core First is Toby Dynavox's program. Let's just take a look at I'm gonna skip right to the video.
Okay, now we're going to take a very brief look at Snap Plus Core First from Toby Dynavox. So this is what Snap Plus Core First looks like. If I go into my settings and go down here to page, I can look at grid size. And we can look at a variety of grid sizes. So we have one big button or two buttons.
I wouldn't recommend one.
And it goes we are at 25 right now, and it goes all the way up to 80, which is a nice array. So let's say I put it at 6 by 6. I have changed the background to black in this particular case for contrast. I tend to like the way that they look a little bit more than gray. What you'll see on this app is along the left-hand side, you have your back button. Whoops, I'm still in editing. You have your back button, you have a core words button, which we're already looking at. You have a quick fires button, which is really intended to be some of those kind of quick hit phrases and words that you would use a lot of the time. So if I go into greetings and social, here are some of those phrases that might be used there. We also have topics, a little bit like the grid that we saw before, but they're just, they're not kind of expanded on the front page the same way they are in the grid. So if we went to bubbles like we saw on the grid, here we have some similar phrases and kind of full sentences that are related to bubbles. So it's just a kind of a different layout. We also have in the toolbar, which is nice, the keyboard, which has some prediction.
Okay, so that's, you know, in a very quick nutshell is what Snap Plus Core First. So you saw a whirlwind version of the AAC, the robust symbol-based AAC apps that I use most often, or at least I at least consider most often. So I think that I need to turn over to Tammy now. But if you have any questions, and you may, as I kind of, you know, ran quickly through all of those in the 55 minutes that we were allotted, if you have any questions, please email me, let me know, and I will be happy to do what I can to answer your question, or if you needed more information about any one app that I demonstrated.
Thank you so much, Lauren. On behalf of Pat, and I can't tell you how much we really appreciate you just giving us a taste of what's out there for AAC apps and all the great information and valuable resources that you provide. Thank you all for your participation today. Before I provide you with the code, I'd like to remind you that the session verification survey will be available at the conference webpage at 3 p.m. today. Please wait until after your next session, where you will enter your codes for the Act 48 and certificates of attendance. The surveys must be completed by this Friday, May 17th at 4 p.m. The code for this session is 1188. Once again, thank you all for your interest and attention today. The next session for Lauren will begin at 2:45, and we will end the webinar now. You can find the links to log into the next session on the conference webpage.